SportsCentury. A true blue-collar girl, Peggy Fleming rose like a snowflake on the wind to the top of a white-collar sport. Her father would drive her through the pre-dawn to the local rink, where she practiced until it was time for school. When life was hard and money was tight, she retreated inside herself to a dreamland where everything was beautiful and serene. Alone at night, she sometimes turned and spun in the light of a street lamp, watching her shadow on the ground. Out of her imagination emerged a unique skating style adored by millions. This half hour will track the eventful rise of an Olympic champion.
She was fairy-like on the ice, very light. She just floated into the air. She was very elfin. She was very mystical. They had never seen anything like that before. And then they saw that this was the future for American skating.
The line of her legs and everything were so beautiful, and she always had such a pretty look on her face and her hair. You know, I mean, she was just like a movie star. She was wonderful.
Elegant, classy, balletic, wispy.
I'm sure every girl out there wished that she could move like Peggy or look like Peggy and float like her on the ice.
Grace was not necessarily Peggy's trademark back on the farm outside San Jose, California. Born the second of four daughters to Doris and Al Fleming on July 27, 1948, she would help to fill a void for her father.
Dad always wanted a son and got four girls instead. I was the athletic one, and Dad always wanted somebody to go play golf with, or we'd go to the beach. I'd be out there, surfing with him and doing all these things. He was an ex-Marine, and he treated us girls like we were in the Marine Corps. And, he'd say, okay, go wash the car, and, he'd go and inspect it after we were done, and he'd go, you call that clean? And you missed a spot over here. And, we'd have to go do it again. I think he gave, the illusion of looking like he would be a tough guy, but underneath, he was a real soft, very emotional kind of guy.
A combat veteran of World War II, Al Fleming drank too much, too often, perhaps in part to hold back the memory of that day when he was wounded by a Japanese grenade.
My dad did have a drinking problem, but I think when you're a kid, my mom always tried to hide it and to shelter us from it. But sometimes when she'd get real upset with him, she would pile us all into the car, and we'd go around to different bars that he would go to, and she'd go in and try to find him and just embarrass him, I'm sure. But we didn't have to do that very often. But it wasn't the normal family life like a lot of other people have. But that was my dad.
A newspaper pressman, Peggy's father often traveled to find work. Sometimes there was enough to cover costs, sometimes not.
It was pretty tough from, what I remember. There were times where, we didn't even have a house to stay in, and I remember us spending the whole summer at a campsite. And, I didn't really put two and two together at that time when I was so young. But my mother made it fun and made it an adventure, and a lot of people go camping for the summer, don't they?
In 1957, Al Fleming took his family on an outing that changed Peggy's life.
I was 9 years old when my dad took us all to the skating rink, and it was just magic to me. That smooth glide over the ice, I'll never, ever forget that. That's the best thing about skating, because it's so quiet and it's relatively effortless to get from one end to the other. And, I just got hooked on it and just got a little carried away.
At 11, Peggy's talents on ice surfaced, and her mother took over, finding coaches, driving her to competitions, even sewing her costumes.
You have to have a parent that pushes you into it and will take you there when you're very young, because when you're very young, you don't know the difference. You like to skate, it's like playing. And so there must have been some kind of a determination on Doris's part to make her into this.
Doris had a very strong personality. She was strong-willed, determined. She gave of herself a lot for this. She was never one to spend time or thoughts or money on herself. It was always on her daughters and her husband, her family.
Peggy practiced at least 4 hours a day, often rising before dawn to get open time at the local ice rink. The cost of this regimen was almost too heavy to bear for her parents.
Doris was always scheming something. In America, it was the rich man's sport.
Somehow they financially could, finagle enough money to pay for the private lessons, and I kept progressing so quickly. And within 3 months, I entered my first competition and won. My mom and my dad always told me that I was special. So I've always had that attitude that, I am special and I can do something special.
Peggy's career was built on a tragedy.
We not only lost the #1 skater in each of the events, pairs, dance, ladies and men, you lost the entire team. We lost top coaches, we lost top judges, we lost top officials. So it was a tremendous loss for our sport.
On Valentine's Day in 1961, a commercial jet carrying the U.S. figure skating team to the World Championships crashed outside Brussels. All aboard were killed, including 18 team members and Fleming's coach, Bill Kipp.
It was hard to compute it. I'd lost my coach on that plane crash. It was also a real loss for me because I lost all my role models. As a 12-year-old, you always aspire to be like the champion of that era, and I had nobody to look up to. And I started to find my own style of skating.
In the wake of the air disaster, junior skaters were pushed to fill the void of talent on the U.S. skating team. For little Peggy Fleming, the trial by fire launched her beyond her years.
I barely qualified to make it into the senior level, and I competed in the '64 Nationals in Cleveland, Ohio, and I thought, I'll feel real good about myself if I come in the top 6. And then it was a real shock when I won the championship, and then my world just turned upside down.
Peggy Fleming, in a startling upset, has won. 15 years old, she is the champion. Peggy Fleming participating for the first time in the senior championship. Last year, you were just 3rd in the juniors. How do you account for the tremendous improvement in your skating, Peggy?
Well, I worked hard this year.
You sure must have worked hard. You don't even sound out of breath.
I am.
Here's a young girl you're going to hear a lot more about, Peggy Fleming of California.
Fleming's unexpected triumph not only qualified her for the 1964 Olympics at Innsbruck, Austria, it catapulted her to a level she'd never known.
It was just, my eyes were like saucers, and it was so fun. It was so fun. I hadn't even been out of California very much. I didn't have a coat. I didn't have a passport. And I'd never seen what world-class skating was like and what the European skaters even look like. And being on a practice rink, I remember thinking, oh my gosh, this is a whole different kind of skating.
A year after watching her 15-year-old daughter finish 6th at Innsbruck, Doris Fleming, who always had designs on Olympic gold at the Grenoble Games in 1968, packed the family off to Colorado Springs, where legendary coach Carlo Fassi held court at the Broadmoor Hotel.
Peggy and Carlo configured very well together. He was sort of a charismatic Italian, spoke sort of broken English. The English words he did get out were often pretty funny. But Carlo certainly understood skating from both the figures point of view and also for doing the jumps and spins and putting the numbers together. So they had a great friendly relationship.
Under Fassi, the 2-time national champion learned the skills she had lacked at Innsbruck and forged herself into excellence at both levels of her sport, freestyle and compulsory figures, which accounted for 60% of the total score.
Peggy was unbeatable because one of the rare figure skaters that had the balance and the refinement to trace those school figures, and also in the freestyle because of that elegant beauty that she had, and she floated into the air. People don't realize that she jumped very high for her build and her height, but there was no effort.
In 1966, the tight-knit team of Peggy, Doris, and Fosse flew to Switzerland for the World Championships. Back home, her three sisters and father watched her perform on television.
Even though she fell in Davos, she still won because she was that dominant. Her top competition, East German, the pretty stocky girls that just couldn't compare with that look that Peggy had.
2 weeks later, the 17-year-old world champion performed an exhibition in Boston. Al Fleming drove from Colorado to be there.
I just had never seen him so proud. He was just so sweet to come to the show. And you could just tell he was just beaming inside.
It was the last time she would see her father. The news came a few weeks later in Moscow, where Fleming was performing. Al had succumbed to his third heart attack. He was 41.
The embassy people found us. And I remember them, cornering my mom and taking me away from all the other skaters. And they took us into a room and told us. And it was just devastating. It was so hard to be in such a public place and get news like this. And it just, pulled the rug out from underneath me. And I remember going home on the airplane just crying my eyes out. And it was just real difficult.
Making chartreuse liquor. And her mother thought, well, maybe it would help if she had a chartreuse dress on. It might just give her another little edge.
She always would wait to the very last minute to finish the dress. It used to drive me crazy and make me so nervous.
She would pick a fight with her right before competition. So to make Peggy really mad and have this good cry, get all of her nervousness out of her system, and then she would skate well.
At 19, Peggy Fleming stormed the Grenoble Olympics. Armed with 5 national and 2 world championships, she was ready to claim the crown she coveted since childhood.
Here she is, Colorado Springs, Colorado, Peggy Fleming.
68, she had a great compulsory figures and she had a big lead. But going into the free skating, she did not skate well. She did not skate very well at all. But by then she had such a big lead that nobody was going to overtake her. It was just hers because by then she was already Peggy Fleming by then.
The gold medal, the highest award attainable. Pretty Peggy Fleming, 19 years old, from Colorado Springs, Colorado.
It was difficult for the family to realize what was ahead of them when Peggy won the Olympics. They couldn't imagine what was going to happen. All of a sudden, Peggy was in the spotlight all the time, everywhere she went.
It was all going very fast for Peggy. It's sort of like life had really now sped up into areas that she had no previous experience with and didn't really know what to make of everything.
Their life changed drastically for one thing because all of a sudden they had some money. They could, afford things that they couldn't afford before.
I loved making money for the first time. It was so cool to finally have money. And I loved making it. It was really neat. I invested and this was all new territory, and I didn't want to screw any of that up because I didn't ever want to go back to the kind of life I grew up in.
Peggy became mainstream pop because Peggy is Peggy, and there was just nobody else around. It was a recreation of this lovely movie star, girl next door look that we hadn't seen in quite a while. She's had a lot of Hollywood-type qualities. If she had had the ambition, I think she could have become a great actress, but Peggy went with the flow.
She starred in 5 television skating specials and won 2 Emmys.
We shot the first one, I remember, at MGM, and Gene Kelly came by, and it was all, it was all very glamorous and very Hollywood, and poor Peggy didn't know who any of these people were, these movie stars that came by. Katharine Hepburn came by. She had no idea.
I mean, I kind of knew who she was. And I found out years later, that was, it is really cool. She came over, she wanted to meet me.
Peggy went from mom making dresses to Bob Mackie, the top designer of glamour.
Doris was there trying to hang on to that whatever it was that she'd had all those years. So I felt always kind of bad for her because Doris would come frumping in, you know, with her purse and sit down, and she'd have a lot to, she'd never stop talking. And Peggy was just always very quiet and kind of went along with it. And then as time went on, you could see Peggy was starting to think for herself and grow up.
In 1981, Fleming joined veteran Dick Button as commentator on ABC's figure skating events.
She's learned the craft, so to speak. It's very hard, I think, for somebody who was who was essentially very shy to suddenly come out and start making commentary, which includes criticism.
She was rather shy, but that was a big change for her. She had never been in front of the public talking, and so she kept saying, am I doing all right?
If learning to criticize other skaters was difficult for Fleming, she was a natural at fun and games.
Peggy off camera is a riot. People don't know it. She has a great sense of humor. I remember her telling me once during a performance at Rockefeller Center, she had something written on her eyelids, and so when she closed them with her partner, it said something you. And her partner cracked up and nobody knew why. That's the Peggy off camera. But she's the consummate professional on camera, just like she is on the ice.
In June of 1970, during a break in the ice follies, Peggy Fleming married medical student Greg Jenkins, the former amateur skater she had met in Colorado Springs. 7 years later, the couple had their first child, Andy. A second son, Todd, arrived in 1988 when Fleming was 40.
I just loved having my kids. I think that completed me so well. I mean, I think I really grew up. I really felt like an adult when we had our first child.
Well, Doris had to let go after she and Greg were married. And when Peggy was skating after she had won the Olympics, Doris wasn't in the picture as close.
She developed into quite a gracious, bright woman. And I saw her opinions start to form, and she had her own opinion on what she would wear and what she wanted to do and not do. And I thought that was good.
In the late 1980s, Doris Fleming entered a long struggle with bone cancer.
Peggy actually was doing some skating at that time, and we were working together, and Doris came to the rink in the wheelchair and sat and watched. And Doris said, now, don't you think you should do this in the number and that in the number? And we really got quite emotional over it because she was quite ill at that time. But she never changed.
She was a very strong lady, and she withstood the chemotherapy really well. But she was strong right to the very, very end, and outspoken still. It was extremely tough to lose my mom. I remember, going back to the skating rink after she died, and it had been a couple months. And I remember getting on the ice and just going, I just feel like part of me is gone. And it's hard.
5 years after her mother's death, Fleming's former coach, Carlo Fossi, died unexpectedly at the 1997 World Championships in Switzerland. 10 months later, Peggy learned that she had breast cancer.
It was a terrible blow to Peggy to find out that she did have cancer, particularly for someone that had taken such good care of herself over the years.
I thought, this just can't be happening to me. I'm doing everything right. I'm eating right, I'm exercising, I go for my regular checkups, and, I don't miss any of it.
Breast cancer, man, Peggy during breast cancer was so brave. I only talked to her a few times because it was exhausting for her, but she really felt that she was supermom and that she could handle everything, and then she found out how exhausting it is.
Despite its debilitating effects, Fleming openly discussed her illness through the media, offering advice, reassurance, and hope to women everywhere.
Peggy's battle with breast cancer was public. She shared it. I think that's a very generous thing to do. She's not one to go after visibility, but I think she wanted to use this to educate people. And it just shows that she's been consistent. It demonstrates how consistent she is as a person.
I think she'd handled her whole life with strength and courage and honesty. She's an incredibly beautiful woman and yet never became a star in her attitude. And she faced everything head on. What an inspiration.
I think Peggy epitomizes what people think of a female figure skater. And she has such grace and elegance on the ice and when she skated. But now she's carried that into her life in other areas. I mean, she's a wonderful commentator. We adore seeing her on TV still. And she's just a wonderful, giving person off the ice. And being an amazing mom and wife as well. She's just got it all.
Al and Doris Fleming always told their daughter she was special. True to that assessment, she became a gift to the world, skating like an angel in the highest realms of the imagination. Off the ice, Fleming's specialness endured. She was the White House guest of 4 administrations, and in 1999, Sports Illustrated named her one of 7 athletes who changed the game.
I think every one of us has a gift that we can do better than anybody else. And finding it early on is really the key thing. And I was one of the lucky ones to find my gift early on. Some people, it takes years and years, and maybe into their 50s before they find their special gift that they really are put on this earth to do. And I think if we can help our kids find their special gifts early, I think that's a gift we can give them.
Quite apart from her ethereal quality on ice, it was electronics that helped Peggy Fleming change the game. At Grenoble in 1968, she performed before much of the world over the first live television hookup in Olympic history. For 3 decades following her gold medal victory, America produced a string of women's skating stars, from Janet Lynn and Dorothy Hamill to Kristi Yamaguchi and Tara Lipinski. But for all the adoration heaped on her successors, Peggy Fleming remains the bellwether of artistry on skates. For SportsCentury, I'm Chris Fowler.